Good evening and welcome to Midweek. Coming up on tonight's show, it was an atrocity that shocked the country. The double murder of two young Polish men with a screwdriver. Diane Connor from TV3's 24 Hours to Kill reveals the events of that day that led to that heinous crime. And as a new year takes hold, we meet the experts who say they really could save your family over €1,000 a year. Well, in 2008, Polish immigrants Paweł Kalite and Mariusz Swajkos were murdered outside their Dublin home in what the judge called a brutal, savage and sadistic attack. TV3's 24 Hours to Kill looks at the 24 hours before Paweł and Mariusz were stabbed by 17-year-old David Kern. Well, joining me now to discuss this case are Diane Connor, presenter of 24 Hours to Kill, and Alan Kennedy, friend and former employer to Paweł and Mariusz. Alan, I suppose Paweł and Mariusz, their story about how they arrived here in Ireland, not untypical of many Eastern Europeans at the time. They had studied in Poland, they wanted to work here before they went back and made their new life back in Poland.
Absolutely. It was their goal to build up enough cash to be able to buy an apartment in Paweł's case and to set up a small repair shop in Mariusz's case. So that was exactly as you would expect.
Paweł was in a serious relationship at the time.
He was indeed, and only on the day of the incident he would have been on to his aunt, and they were trying to organise going back to Poland to organise a mortgage to buy an apartment to start out a new life together, and that would have happened later in 2008. And similarly, Mariusz was expected back home in late 2008 also to start up a little business based in the hometown.
He was incredibly skilled with his hands, Mariusz. He had a love of Beetle cars in particular.
Yes, the family have kept Mariusz's Beetle, which he rebuilt from the ground up, and is trimmed in leather, which has a tie into the family because the family, his dad ran a tailor shop making leather coats and which his brother now runs. So the car is trimmed out in leather from top to bottom.
Two great guys, great workers.
Yeah, Ace has a habit of recruiting good people and has always paid them based on their skill level, and has maintained long-term staff, and these guys were just in that mould. And Paweł, for example, had recently completed an advanced painting course which was run by our suppliers and done in Polish for the benefit of those guys who didn't have English.
Diane, what happened on that day in February in 2008?
Well, on that morning, Paweł went to work that day. He doesn't normally, he went in to help out, really, Alan, didn't he? And while he was working, David Kern, who was 17 at the time, he was up at 10 o'clock that morning, drinking and taking drugs down by the locks, the Grand Canal near Inchicore. He was there with his friend, Sean Kyo, and two girls, and his cousin, and I think there were two other guys there as well. Spent the morning drinking. David Kern admitted taking 15 to 20 what he called blueies and yellows, benzodiazepines.
He was a teenager, Diane.
He was a teenager, really into drinking, and he'd had a drug problem as well. He had been in and out of rehabilitation and was seeking treatment at that time and was supposed to have counselling the day before, but he had been actually stabbed 2 days before this incident with Paweł and Mariusz, and as a result of that he wasn't able to have his counselling on Friday, and then on Saturday went back to his old ways of drinking. So he was drinking with them all day Saturday. During the afternoon he came across a moped with his friend Sean Kyo. They took the moped, couldn't get it started, took 2 bottles of wine out of it and a screwdriver, the fateful screwdriver, and then torched the moped, and they went off then down to an old factory in the area and did what they had done on previous occasions in the past, breaking into factories. This is how they got their money to buy the drink and drugs. And the 2 girls had gone up to the takeaway, the local chip shop on Binbulbin Road, and they were there along with David Curran's cousin. And Paweł, at around 6 o'clock, 6:15, he was hungry and went down to the chip shop to get some chips. And that was about 25 past 6 when he was coming out of the chipper. And that's really when it took a major turn.
A very simple incident. He walked by and literally bumped into somebody. This is how this all started.
It was a bumping. Paweł and David Kern's cousin bumped into each other, and there was a few words exchanged. Paweł chased the 15-year-old youngster around a little bit, and David Kern's father happened to be passing in a jeep, and he pulled in.
And that's when things, Diane, turned really sinister. Let's take a look at this clip.
It was only when the young boy's uncle, who happened to be David Curran's father, came around the corner and saw what was happening, that the fight took on a more sinister, more serious tone.
Michael Curran jumped out of his car and got involved in the scuffle. He grabbed Pavel by the throat and pushed him up against the semi-closed shutters of the butcher shop beside the Drimna takeaway.
There were actually staff inside who had just closed up the shop for the day, and they heard this bang against the shutter.
And the two girls who were watching this then got involved and they attacked Pavel as well.
Pavel was knocked to the ground, he was given a few kicks and a few slaps.
The unprovoked attack on Pavel didn't last too long, as the owner of the butcher shop came out and broke it up.
The local butcher said to the people who were attacking Pavel, he's had enough, leave it be.
And then at that point, Michael Curran just left the scene. He got back into his car and he drove away and he left the scene.
As Michael Curran left, Pavel picked up his chips and headed for home. However, as he passed by the two girls, one of them lashed out and struck him hard across the side of the head.
And according to eyewitnesses who were there, he never reacted at all to this. They kind of said he was in somewhat of a stunned state. He didn't really understand what had unfolded, and he just kept walking towards home at this point.
So Diane, Pavel walked away from the incident and headed for home.
He did after the butcher came out and actually broke up that fight outside his shop. So Pavel was walking home, obviously very humiliated and hurt and upset about what happened. And the two girls actually, one of them threw the bottle of vodka against his head as well, but Pavel just kept walking. He went home, went inside the house and was very upset. His housemates were trying to comfort him, and he was quite angry as well at what had happened. In the meantime, one of the girls rang David Curran's phone and told David Curran that his father had been stabbed by a Polish guy outside the chipper. She actually later denied even making the phone call. David Curran and Sean Keogh went racing. David Curran himself saying he was in a rage, racing down the road to the takeaway where the girls were and his cousin, and he was told that it was the Polish pointed down to where Pavel had gone in home, which was just down the road. He was in a rage, absolutely in a rage. They went down the road shouting abuse across actually at the house. Pavel had come outside with his housemate Camilla, and they were shouting obscenities really and about Polish people. And Camilla was shouting back, why? You know, why are you saying that? And
he went to attack him, Diane, and it wasn't arbitrary. It was in a very targeted way. Just take a look at this clip.
He didn't try and injure him anywhere in the body. He went straight for his head, straight for his temple, and with one swift movement he penetrated his temple.
It went through, it fractured his skull, it pierced his brain, it left, as the state pathologist described it, a tunnel wound, the full length of the screwdriver right through the brain.
There were two wounds of a type cross-shaped, and of a type made by a Phillips type or cross-headed screwdriver. In one case, the screwdriver had penetrated right through the side of his skull and penetrated his brain for 11 centimetres, that's about 4.5 inches, damaging the vital centres of the brain.
Pavel would have collapsed instantly onto the ground after he was stabbed because of the nature, not necessarily because of the strength of the blow, but obviously because the screwdriver had been rammed into his head, so he instantly collapsed. He smashed his head off the ground. It's believed that's how he came to lose a number of teeth. But also, this was when Sean Keogh decided that he'd set upon him.
With Pavel on the ground, Sean Keogh weighed in, kicking him in the face, inflicting more injuries.
Marius's instant reaction was to run out of the house and sort of lunge in the direction of Curran to try and help his friend, who at this stage he would have had no idea was fatally injured.
Unfortunately, Marius's act of bravery proved futile, and he was also attacked by Curran in an identical fashion to his friend.
Diane, David Kern and Sean Keogh fled the scene, and there followed a series of texts between the group.
They tried to create an alibi. Initially they were texting each other back and forth saying mad day, and somebody had seen it then on teletext, and then the text messages changed, trying to create an alibi. David Kern saying get rid of your phone, sure, I wasn't in Drimna at all that day. And then obviously eventually the guards were put onto their tail, and they arrested both David Kern and Sean Keogh. Now, Sean Keogh actually admitted being there that day. He admitted kicking Marius in the head, but he also kicking Pavel, sorry. But he also, but David Kern was very, very different. David Kern denied it, and he actually pointed the finger at Sean Keogh. Tried to pass off the blame.
He gave him up almost immediately. Alan, when did you first hear on the radio that 2 Polish men were involved in this incident?
Well, if I might backtrack a bit, I waved goodbye to Pavel when he was finishing up
at 3 o'clock on the Saturday. 3:30
in the afternoon. And later on that evening, I was working over the weekend because it was the early days in that particular branch, and Pavel had come in to help us. So in working through, every hour on the hour came the news bulletin, and 2 Polish guys, etc., etc. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, I hope none of our guys know these people, you know, are anyway threatened by this. And this went on because I worked all through Saturday, late Saturday night, all through Sunday, and every hour on the hour. And then come 7:30 on Monday, when people started arriving to work, it all broke at that stage. That was the first time to be fair to the guards, they did, I think, ring the branch, but because I was so busy trying to catch up on others, I didn't answer the phone. There was nobody expected to answer the phone. So as I say, I was well behind the event when it came to Monday morning.
When you rang the hospital, Alan, you realised then how serious this was. The 2 men were critical.
It's interesting about ringing the hospital because you're not related to them, even though I identified myself as the general manager of the company and somebody who knew both of them. Strictly speaking, I wasn't entitled to any information at all. But they were helpful and did explain in some detail what the nature of the injuries were. And it was only when I read back my notes of the conversation afterwards, I realised what they were telling me. These were both fatal injuries, even though at that point in time they were both alive, but only, I don't know what the term, medically alive.
Did you realise they're not going to clock in again? I'm not going to see these guys again.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have quite a number of the guys on the floor, Irish, Polish, Lithuanian, whatever, all extremely upset. In fact, everybody around us upset. So you're trying to deal with that, know what the best thing to do is, and you realise very quickly now we're going to have to face some media and deal with that as well.
Both men were convicted, Diane.
Well, David Kern was convicted of the 2 murders, and he got a double life sentence for both Marius and Pavel. Sean Keogh was actually found not guilty of the 2 murders, but found guilty of assault causing harm, and he was jailed for 4 years. But he was also, he had been on bail at the time of this as well. He had 75 previous convictions, and he was in prison even at the time of this trial for other offences as well.
Alan, you've been back and forth to Poland a couple of times.
Quite a number of times, 5 or 6 times at this stage, and so we would know our way around. We know the families at this stage. We're in reasonable contact. We exchange Christmas cards, emails, photographs, that sort of thing, and with any luck we'll probably visit them again this year.
What a shocking tragedy. I mean, 2 young men that any country would have been delighted to have, a privilege to have them, hard-working, decent young men, any community, any country.
Well, there is the point that David Kern will serve 15 years or whatever, but Pavel and Marius's families have a life sentence. I said it on the steps of the court, as you probably know, that every day Pavel's dad and Marius's dad visit 2 graveyards to make sure that their sons' graves are well kept, and they are absolutely beautiful.
All right. If you want to hear the full story of Pavel and Marius, you can tune in to TV3 next Monday night, 9 o'clock. Diane Connor is presenting 24 Hours to Kill, and you can see that entire story and tragedy. Alan, thanks very much for coming into us this evening, and Diane. All right, is it your preference that an Irish person gets a job over someone from another country? Now, living here, well, have you found yourself saying, I'm not racist, but... Well, after the break, we discuss racism in Ireland. Stay with us. Welcome back. No blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Do you remember those signs? Well, Ireland's past experience of discrimination led many foreign people to believe that the Irish themselves would be welcoming to asylum seekers, to refugees, to students and indeed workers from other countries. But racial attacks here are on the increase. In a moment we'll speak with a young man left blind in one eye following a racist assault. But first, Midweek's Ciara Doherty has this report which contains some strong language.
It will not deal with council queries from black Africans.
Toyosi was stabbed to death last Friday night.
He called me a bad name.
Moses Ayawale was working as a taxi driver when he was assaulted on Pearse Street in Dublin early last week. He died less than 3 days later.
While it is difficult to prove that incidents like these were racially motivated, evidence suggests that there is an upward trend in the number of cases of racial abuse. The attacks can be anything from shouting and verbal abuse to spitting, beating and even more serious violence. It's a crime that crosses the social spectrum.
There's a range of perpetrators, from young children in neighbourhoods to colleagues in a workplace to customers in a shop. You know, there isn't a particular perpetrator. And the study we did, like children as young as 2 and 3 were verbally abusing their neighbours with racial taunts. Now, where does a 2 or 3-year-old learn that?
8 years ago, Bartholomew Omofo moved to Ireland from Nigeria with his wife, and they went on to have 4 children. Mr. Omofo worked as an accountant here before losing his job. He took up taxiing as a way of making a living in the town of Ennis, where he and his family settled.
Bartholomew, why did you think that Ireland would be a good country to settle in?
I noticed that Ireland in the past have suffered racism and discrimination in the past, coupled with the fact that they are all over the world, so I think they will be more exposed to the traumatic effect of racism, and as such they will be able to welcome people well and allow foreigners to assimilate with them in the country.
And did you notice a change in the public's attitude towards you and other black drivers?
Most of them, they come out openly and they ask you questions. You know, how did you come in here? How come you have a job? And they had no job. The Irish people had no job. Some of them felt that we are exploiting the economy, we are exploiting the system.
Bartholomew says 70 to 80% of people will not even get into his taxi. But one passenger who did turned on him and attacked him over a €15 fare.
When the man came in from inside, ran at me and headbutted me. I lost 2 of my front teeth. I sustained 4 stitches. After doing that, he ran to my car, calling me all sorts of racist names. He said, I'm a black nigger, we should fuck off. We should fuck up this country. What are we doing in this country here? He ran to my car and he damaged my car, the bodywork of my car with his feet. That cost me over €700 to get fixed. And my tooth cost me €2,400 to get a replacement. You know, so it's been very, very traumatic. Human beings should not be treated like that. We are all the same, irrespective of the color or race or wherever you come from.
An increase in racist incidents often coincides with a downturn in the economy, as people perceive foreign nationals to be a threat to their jobs and livelihoods.
We're in a deep recession, and when people are in a recession, they're frightened and they're fearful and they look for scapegoats. And I think sometimes somebody that's considered other is the scapegoat, and that's difficult.
During the boom years, about 50,000 people a year came to live in Ireland. Some of these people were seeking asylum here and were given accommodation in detention centres similar to this one. Many have been living in centres like this for years. Sue Conlon from the Irish Refugee Council believes the government's attitude towards asylum seekers feeds into society's attitude towards foreign nationals as a whole.
It isolates a complete group of people who are not Irish, who are predominantly not white, and treats them in a completely different way to every other member of Irish society. That, putting it bluntly, is a form of racism.
Failure by government, she says, to properly recognise and integrate these people gives others the feeling that their racist attitudes are legitimate.
If they are fed the idea that a certain group of people are unwanted and are abusing the system, and if they're brought up in a certain way which isn't tolerant of those who are different, then sometimes they take it to the absolute extreme. And they say, like they did with the 15-year-old Nigerian boy, you're unwanted, I hate you, I'm going to kill you.
Historically, Ireland had very little immigration, and the demographic here was white Irish. In recent years that's changed, but experts feel the majority of Irish people are simply not ready to accept our new society.
What it means to be Irish now is very different, and so they're not them, it's now about we. And I think if we don't accept that, then you're always considering that this them should go home, that they don't have the same rights and entitlements, that they shouldn't have that job or they shouldn't have that house.
Unlike Ireland, the UK has had an ethnically diverse society for decades, but still they struggled with personal and institutional racism. It took a case like the brutal murder of Stephen Lawrence, the teenager beaten to death 18 years ago, to make racism an issue in the consciousness of the mainstream and for changes to be made. Back in the town of Ennis, the president of the Irish Taxi Drivers Association denied that black drivers experience racial abuse.
And I just wouldn't say it is a racial attack, because I'm working in the town of Ennis here with the people who are so nice. There would be no racial abuse in this town, never has been and never will be.
Bartholomew, however, would disagree.
That assault that you talked about, though, that wasn't really just a one-off, was it?
When we are driving through the street at night, looking for fare, when we're driving through, some people, they throw things at us. They throw burger, whatever they are eating, they throw them at our cars. Some of them, they pretend as if they want to get into the car. They get in through the passenger seat, opening the door and getting out through the second door, thereby leaving both doors open, and they will walk away. Sometimes they open our boots while we are driving. They just open the boot and just walk away. So we'll be forced to go down and lock our doors and our boats, which is even riskier for us, because sometimes we feel that we might even be attacked in that process, like, you know. So sometimes you see people, some probably they're walking in group, one person wants to get into the taxi, you see other people will be screaming at him, oh, don't get into that taxi, he's a black man, he's a black driver, don't get into it.
Like many other foreign nationals living here, Bartholomew fears that if those in charge don't take this issue seriously, it may take a defining case like Stephen Lawrence's to jolt this nation's conscience.
Well, joining me now in studio are Mapfuma Chizambra, who suffered a racist attack, and Catherine Lynch from the Irish Network Against Racism. Mapfuma, let's go back some time, back to 2001, and how you ended up coming from Zimbabwe to Ireland. You were a student at the time.
Yes, I came to Ireland from Zimbabwe in 2001 to study at UCD. Mm-hmm. I came to study for my undergraduate studies, to do my undergraduate studies, and then I graduated in 2005, got a scholarship for PhD in the same department, electronic engineering in UCD, which unfortunately I couldn't finish because of the what happened to me in 2006.
Mm-hmm. So you have a degree, you have a master's degree, and you were a year into your PhD.
I enrolled for PhD in 2005. 2006 I was attacked, so I took a year out of college, and because of circumstances beyond anybody's control, I couldn't finish the PhD. So I just finished up writing up a master's degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened at that party that night in 2006?
It was a predominantly a party of Zimbabweans. They were celebrating graduation of one of the people who lives at the house. They were celebrating their sister's graduation, so I hear. And we just heard some commotion outside. We didn't know what was happening. Like we were in the house and the commotion was outside the house, so we didn't know what was happening. But we heard some glasses, glasses dropping in the driveway of the house. So we just saw that there were glasses outside, which I learned afterwards that it was actually the glass door that was smashed, and the glass door of the house. And then when I looked outside, when we were about, we were deciding that maybe it was time for us to call it a night.
You were on your way home?
Well, we were about to go home, so we said, okay, because we could see the car, I had parked the car outside the house, on the road, on the street, and I could see it from the house. So we decided that maybe it was time for us to go home. That's when we saw that the windows of the car and the lights, they were smashed. Like, we didn't see people smashing them, but we saw that they were smashed. And then when we went outside, we saw some lads leaving the cars that were parked outside. We tried to follow them. We said, okay, let's follow them, and let's follow them, see where they live, and so that we can, when the police come, we can show them where they live. Let's see where they are going. And when we were following them, because it was me, myself, my uncle, and my uncle's friend, who is since become my friend now, when we tried to follow them, we saw that they started coming back to us, and they were holding golf clubs and hailing sticks. And the next thing that I remembered was waking up in the hospital.
You were just set upon?
Yeah.
What were they saying to you?
Well, they didn't say anything to me that I heard then, but what I heard afterwards, especially during the trial, actually what I heard, what happened was that they were asked to leave the party because they were causing trouble. Apparently one of the guys who was at the party, he had a Zimbabwean black person, he had an Irish girlfriend. So they tried to ask the girl out, and she said, I have my own boyfriend. And then they started saying insulting words, to the girl. Or you...
what did they say?
Well, you nigger lover, blah, 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 whatever they were saying. And then I didn't, because I didn't hear this, it was just like it's hearsay, I heard it from other people. But that's what they said. And then they smashed the doors, and then they were asked to leave the house. And when they went, I think they went to their houses on the same street. They came back, and then they smashed the cars. And then the evidence, or what I heard in the courts now, that the Garda were saying, some of the reports that they received was that they were saying that one of the guys shouted that, do you want to see me crack a nigger skull? While they were hitting me when I was on the ground. So yeah, those are some of the remarks that they placed upon myself anyway.
How long were you in hospital, Mafumo?
2 months.
Yeah. Our viewers can see that you're disfigured. You have lost the sight in your right eye.
Yeah, I was in hospital from the 1st of October. I came out on the 24th of November. And the doctors said that I had, I think, up to 80 facial bone damage, and the right socket of my, the socket of my right eye, it was sunken. It was smashed, so they had to repair that. So all the repairing that they did, it needed those two months, but still they couldn't revive the eye. Unfortunately, I was left blind by the incident.
How else has this affected you? You obviously had to stop your studies.
Yeah. Well, I stopped the studies, like I've pointed out earlier. I couldn't finish up my PhD. I found that it was a bit tough for me to concentrate on the studies with all that was going on, the medicals, trying to recuperate, and or everything. Like it was just a bit tough for me to properly concentrate. So
your sleeping has been affected. You can only sleep on one side.
On one side, yeah. I can't use this other side properly.
Strenuous activity, that's all gone.
Unfortunately, yeah. Well, the doctor said that you can do them, but I find it really tough now to do any strenuous activities. Like I used to play soccer every Sunday, like in the park with the lads. But now, ever since because they inserted some metal pins in my head, and so they said, look, any contact sports you cannot do anymore. So
you were on course to qualify in a few years' time, of course, with your PhD. So your prospects, your future would have been very bright, and you would have had a lot of aspirations for yourself and your family. And I know you have a little girl. You don't even work now, do you?
No, I don't. No.
You can't work.
Well, I can work, but I've since found it tough. I think because of the amount of time that I took eventually to finish my studies, I found it a bit tough. I mean, the environment is not right at the moment anyway. But I've since found it a bit tough to convince the employers that I have recuperated and I can work as normally as other people can work.
Catherine, I know a lot of our viewers watching this tonight will be absolutely, quite rightly, appalled and disgusted by what has happened to Mapfumo, and they will be saying to themselves, that's a shockingly racist attack, and I'm not racist at all. But unwittingly, in other areas of their lives, perhaps they are racist. Perhaps they don't even realise it. Perhaps they're saying things like, I'm not racist, but there are too many black people in this country. I'm not racist, but there's too many black children in my child's school, and she's falling behind.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think a lot of our viewers will be thinking tonight?
I think some viewers probably will be, and certainly, I mean, I think the stories we've heard this evening, both Mapfuso and also from Bartholomew, are really upsetting, Colette, and I'm sure your viewers will be, as you say, upset by them. And they're shocking, and I have read about Mapfumo's case, for example, in the print media, in the newspaper, and I was shocked. But there is a profound effect when you actually meet the person who's experienced this, and I suppose in my course of work, I do meet people on a regular basis who have experienced racism. And I think there is a problem around racism. As you say, it's not always the very severe cases, it's that kind of everyday racism. But would you
call it casual racism, Catherine? And I don't mean it to sound any less. Obviously, it's an extremely negative thing.
Yeah, you would. It's the kind of things that people just take for granted, comments that they make that they don't think too much about. But I mean, I think it's really important that we're having this show tonight and that we're hearing Mapfuso's story and other people's story, because the problem that we have is that there is a denial of racism. And there is that kind of myth that we have that, well, the Irish will complain, we might moan, but we'll never actually do anything about it. We're not going to raise the tax. So yeah, the kinds of things that you're saying, they will make the comments, but we won't do anything.
If you send a text message, a joke about black people, or if you laugh about black people, are you a racist then?
You are, really. And I think this is one of the things, there's a lot of shame about being a racist, and people should be ashamed about it, but at the end of the day, in a way, we're kind of a product of our environment, and we all need to admit that there is a chance that we too hold some prejudices. Like, I know I would hold some prejudices, but what we are finding is that the severity of incidents is increasing. So there is an increase in racism, but at the same time as that, what we're seeing is that there seems to be a greater tolerance or an understanding of racism. So people are making these jokes, or people are making comments about different nationalities taking our jobs, and people aren't saying anything, and it's this silence that really, I think, is allowing racism to go unchecked.
Mapfumo, your perception of Irish people now, we're meant to be the country of 100,000 welcomes.
Well, I don't think my perception has been changed that much, because, obviously you expect bad apples in any basket that you are going to have, but obviously now I'm a bit more cautious in my dealings with Irish people. I'll tell you, I'll roll back down there. the reason why I came here was because in Zimbabwe I went to a missionary school, and the priests there were from Ireland. So we asked them, like me and my friend, we asked them for addresses of Irish universities, and they gave us UCD and other universities, and we just applied, and I'm the one who got the place to come here, and he didn't get it. So, but what they told me, they had informed me, like what you're saying, the country of 1,000 welcomes, like 100,000. They had told me that no, Ireland is the place to be. But now I know that okay, I shouldn't just take anything from at face value. Like there are racist people in Ireland. I will have to admit that. I mean. Some few weeks back, like I was listening on the radio, George Hook, he was having a show on the radio, and like some guys who were talking on the radio, like who were calling, like they were just the hatred that was in their voice, whatever they were saying. It just showed me that okay, maybe people might not want to say that they are racist, like what Catherine is saying, but indeed there is some racist element in Ireland, and
unwittingly racist.
Yeah, I think so.
Mafuma, I hope your recovery continues, because I know you're still getting there, and I know you have a gorgeous baby girl that you're trying to look out for and trying to do your best for, and I do hope you get to go back to your PhD and finish it here in this country, and that your experience from here on in is going to be an awful lot more positive.
So too.
Thank you for coming in to us tonight,
thank
Mafuma.
you so much. Thank you so much, Colette.
And thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
All right, coming up after the break, the experts who can save your family over €1,000 this year. Stay with us. Right, you're very welcome back. Well, funds are tight in every Irish household right now, so what's the best way to save money in 2012? Well, in a moment we'll be getting some top tips from the experts, but first, Midweek's Michael Ryan has more.
So Christmas is well and truly behind us. We've all overeaten, probably overspent, and now it's back to reality. According to a recent survey, 83% of us think 2012 will be an even more difficult financial year than last year. Prices seem to be going one way, up. There's the extra VAT, a hike in motor tax, public transport costs, not to mention the new household charge. And with our pockets being squeezed more than ever, saving money is the name of the game. So how do you do it? Well, listen up.
Look at all your income, look at all your expenditure, and like a government, like a family, like an individual or even a company, you know, if expenditure exceeds income, you've got two choices. Earn more or cut costs, right? So if you've then got that expenditure and you've got that income, then it makes sense then to look at the income again and ask yourself two questions. Number one, do I need it? Number two, is there a better or cheaper alternative? I have these 100 top money saving tips, and there are 5 categories, and the 5 categories would be finance, food, drink and household, cars and fuel, lifestyle and electricity, believe it or not, and all of that you could, you know, there's 100 of them.
There's the opportunity to save €500+ a year by switching, or at least finding the best deals even within the supplier that you have right now. There's plenty of scope to be able to save money. Home energy bills would be number one, even for people who've switched before, because introductory discounts usually last just for 1 year, and you go on to standard rates, which is bringing you back to square one. It means that you could save probably €20 a month if you have gas and electricity, just by making a switch to the best deal. Then I'd look at something like home communications. If you're taking, whether it's calls, line rental, home phone or broadband from separate companies or just separate deals within the same company, what you should really be doing is consolidating them all together, and you can usually save about €20 a month by doing this.
The price of health insurance is an outgoing that's getting bigger all the time, but could a bit more research make the difference?
there's a fantastic site, HIA.ie, which is the Health Insurance Authority, where you can actually check on all the different plans that are there. Would you believe, you know, like the VHI have something like 83 separate plans. They've actually run out of names at this stage. Remember when it used to be A, B, C, D, E? Well, now there's PI 113 and all sorts of numbers. So you can really, really get bamboozled. So what you've got to do is identify what actually you need for your family. You might have two grown-up sons or daughters who actually don't need the insurance, and yet you're paying for them.
The big one for this time of year is car insurance. We have no fully comprehensive comparison services on car insurances in Ireland at the moment, which means that we'll need to do the legwork ourselves. But what I'd suggest that people do is call their own insurance company. Once they receive the renewal letter, see if they can do any better. Call 3 other insurance companies, see what they can do with the best quote, come back to their own insurance company, see if they can beat it, and if they can't, switch. Most people should be able to save about €100, maybe even more.
So the message is do your homework, because aside from the areas we've already mentioned, experts say you could also make big savings this year on grocery bills, transport costs, or even your tax bill. And now more than ever, every cent counts.
Well, joining me now in studio are Aideen Sheehan, Consumer Affairs Correspondent with the Irish Independent, and Jill Kirby, Personal Finance Journalist. What's a promiscuous switcher, Aideen?
Yeah, well, this is an industry term used a lot in the energy industry, but probably across a whole range of sectors. It's to define the kind of modern-day consumer who isn't going to just sit with their old, you know, with ESB or whoever it may be and stick with them forever. They're going to ring around every year and go for the cheapest option that's available. So they're the opposite probably of what companies want. New entrants to the market might decide this is great if we can get people to switch, but what they really want is you to switch once and stay with them. But what's increasingly happening is each year people are going, where can I get a better deal? Ringing up companies, trying to get the best introductory offer they can, and then when their year or whatever is up, finding another better deal and switching again.
So you can be a promiscuous switcher when it comes to everything. I mean, gas, electricity, car insurance, presumably almost
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I mean, and you should be, because that's the only way you're going to get the best value.
All right. What's a discretionary spender?
Discretionary spending is the money that you don't absolutely have to spend every month. I mean, there's essential spending, which of course is the mortgage and food, utilities, the insurance that we were just talking about. You have to have motor insurance, you have to have home insurance if you have a mortgage. Those are all the kind of essential spends. Discretionary spending is the other stuff, and often people find, I think, if they do a proper budget, a budgeting process, that it's the discretionary spending that is getting out of control.
This is the latte on the way to work sort of stuff, Jill.
Yeah, it's not just that. I think discretionary spending probably is now including, you know, even those people who are still taking holidays. That really is a discretionary spend now. Taxes are going up so much, and the cost of the essential stuff that we absolutely need, of course, is also going up. And the discretionary spending is widening. I used to think that you wouldn't include Christmas in discretionary spending. Well, we all spent way too much on Christmas in the past.
Almost €1,000 each family this year on
Yeah,
Christmas.
I think it's probably, that's come down though. I can remember when it was a lot higher than that. Quoted as a lot higher than that. So, but you're right. I mean, discretionary spending is still, you know, picking up newspapers and magazines and which you wouldn't normally maybe always buy. And it is the shopping that you might do compulsively because you're bored, or on the weekend. You know, shopping turned into a social activity, and that's all discretionary spending that I don't think people have very much of anyway. And we saw this Christmas, people were cutting back a lot.
Aideen, almost every single viewer who is watching this programme tonight has a mobile phone, and they may not be on the right plan, and this is one area that we tend not to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. People often think, oh, you know, I spend €40 a month and I get like 200 minutes or 300 minutes, but what you might find if you look at your bill is that you're actually not using anything near your allowance. They did a study on this in the UK last year, and they found that on average people were spending around €230 a year more than they needed to on their mobile phone, because either they weren't using all the minutes in their package or else they were paying for a package that gave them too few minutes and therefore paying then higher rates on the amount they went over. So it's really important, if you look at your usage, look at your bill, see, you know, look back at it over a few months, see how many texts you're sending, how many minutes of calls you're making, and look for a package that fits in with that, because that's the way you'll get the best rate.
Do some of the mobile phone companies have apps to say you've used up 5% or 10% of your minutes or your texts, to give you a rough idea?
Yeah, well, I found the best way can be to look on your phone, or else get an itemised bill. I think one of the savings that can be a mistake, people opt for e-billing because sometimes that gives you a cheaper rate, but it's actually, it's one of those things where even paying a little bit more to get a paper bill can help you with monitoring that your actual use. It makes it easier.
Is that website callcost.ie around still?
Callcost.ie is around,
where you can plug in. I tend to do loads of texts in the evening, or I ring America once a month, and you can plug in all this information. It will figure out for you.
It will figure out for you what the best deal is, you know, from all of the providers, and you know that's a very easy way to make savings, and it's really well worth doing, because you know it's a lot of money, a couple of €100 each year you could be saving yourself, you know.
Jill, health insurance, there's widely differing views on this, and we know that 6,000 people have dropped out of the health insurance market because of the increasing costs, and we don't know what way they're going to go in the future. If you can cut back on your discretionary spending, is it an essential, is it a good thing to spend money on?
I think it is. I mean, I've always believed that health insurance is important in this country because we have a National Health Service that I think is pretty dysfunctional. The waiting times are enormous for certain conditions and for certain treatments, especially for consultants in many cases too. You know, it's not just waiting to get into the hospital if you're a public patient, it's waiting to see the consultant, and that could be months before you get onto the waiting list for the treatment that he might recommend or that he's presenting to you as necessary. And but by the same token, the cost of health insurance for a family of, you know, 3 children and parents is about €3,000 now. It's a lot more than it was even a few years ago, partly because of all the extra costs the government is putting on, but also, of course, because of the health insurance levy that has been put on it.
You can have several different plans within one family.
Yes, you can.
Because I think most people watching this programme tonight, everyone in the house will be on the one plan.
Yeah, that's right. And even though the insurers are actually building these sort of family plans now, you know, parents and kids plans or whatever, it's still worth shopping around, because too many people continue to leave their healthy children on the plan that the parents are on, and the parents are looking for...
Are you saying don't insure your children?
No, absolutely not. I think you should insure your children, but you shouldn't necessarily have them on a higher value plan. Most children who are in hospital are not, you know, desperately ill. I mean, they're in for all sorts of different conditions. Only a small minority of children are terribly, terribly sick who do have to have some sort of a treatment. Most kids are put in public wards. I mean, and that's a good thing for children to be in, you know, and it's only if they have an immune problem, or if they're contagious, or if they're desperately ill, that they have their own rooms. So, you know, to have private health insurance, chances are you're never going to use it for your children, because it really is paying for accommodation. But all health insurance, and we can debate all night about the, you know, the political propriety of this, but all health insurance allows you to avoid the increasingly long waiting lists.
You're ideologically opposed to having health insurance, are you?
No, I'm not ideologically opposed to it.
But you don't have
people, but I don't have any, because my experience of the public health service has actually been reasonably good. I had a baby under the public health service. I had a really good experience. So, you know, and I know other people who had private health insurance, and you know, they didn't get a private room for it. They didn't seem to be any better off than I was. Slightly longer waits at their prenatal checkup, or slightly shorter waits at the prenatal checkups, but it wasn't much of a difference. So
pregnancy isn't an illness, though, and my argument about it is that if you have a child, because we were talking about kids, if you have a child with bad, you know, tonsils, and they constantly are getting infections through the winter, and they're on antibiotic after antibiotic, or they've got grommet problems, and I'm talking about a family experience. We have all the kids in our family have grommet and tonsil problems. There's an 18-month waiting list. I mean, and so your child, and it's not that serious a condition, but it gets more serious if they don't respond to the treatment very well. So you can get your children's tonsils out pretty quickly.
If you can afford the private health
insurance.
insurance.
Let me just say, though, it's only about 150, you can still get a child's insurance plan for about €150 a year.
Okay.
And I, for one,
and either way, you have to shop around, whether it's VHI, Bupa, Quinn, whoever it is. We've completely run out of time, unfortunately. We're going to come back to this whole issue of health insurance and which plan you should be on, and if you should be in it, or which one you should be in. In the meantime, Jill, this is your book. This is everything you need to know about pensions, tax relief, money, what to do with it. Just very quickly, one tip before we go. Save money in 2012. Get rid of the car? No?
Well, listen, if you have to, a car, the AA did a study for 2011, a big family saloon, you know, a typical sort of family, good-sized family car costs about $11,000 a year to run. Try and work out your motoring costs this year. I think you'd probably save fair.
You're getting the bus home. Perfect. All right, thanks for coming in. Aideen and Jill, thanks very much for coming in. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us on the show, or you have a story that you'd like to tell us, you can contact the TV3 website, or you can email midweek@tv3.ie. Good night.